All right, welcome everybody. So good to have you. Mary, can I invite you to go ahead and shut those doors? That way noise from the front desk doesn't filter down this way. Now that I've got so many of you here, we're going to pass the offering plate. So good to have you. Thanks for coming out and showing interest. I didn't know for sure how many people would come. Looks like we've had just enough to fit in here. And on behalf of all of us that traveled overseas, thank you for our prayers. We certainly needed them. I'll tell a little bit of the story, but what a marvelous, marvelous adventure we had together. We advertised for this trip just about a year ago. And many of you know, if you've been around Friendship Village, since 2010, we have worked with a tour company called Pilgrim Tours. And they are a Christian-owned tour company based out of Pennsylvania. They travel all over the world. They specialize in trips to Israel. And Friendship Village through the years has done 7 trips with them to Israel. They have been phenomenal. I've been privileged to be a part of 3 of those journeys, and each one has been absolutely fantastic. The last time we were there was the fall of 2022, and we had planned to be there in the spring of 24. In fact, we took registrations and signed people up. And then many of you know that 6 months before we were scheduled to be on that trip, war broke out in the Middle East. I actually had a good friend who arrived on his own tour of Israel the day before the war broke out, and he spent the first 3 days in the basement of a hotel in Jerusalem before he was able to get out. And there may be a day when we go back. The Israel trips are amazing, and you get to see places that maybe you've read about all through your life in the scripture, and they come alive. You get to see those stories in action and walk those steps. Well, after the war broke out, we began to look at other options, and I worked with Pilgrim Tours and discovered they did what was called the Christian Heritage Tour of England and Scotland. The only other time that I'm aware of that we worked with Pilgrim Tours in a place beside Israel was in the fall of 2017. Some of you might remember that as the 500th year anniversary of Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses on the Wittenberg door. And they call that the birth of the Protestant Reformation. And so there was a small group from Friendship Village that was a part of that. I'm looking around the room, and Jim Carr, I think you were part of that journey over there. And so we've just heard so many wonderful things about Pilgrim Tours, and we thought, well, we'll take a chance. And I put together the dates and worked with the tour company, presented it to our leadership, who they gave us a big thumbs up, and very quickly we began to take on registrations. In the end, there were 27 of us traveling together from Friendship Village, 19 from here at Chesterfield. It's the largest participation we've ever had from our campus. 13, 14 residents, the rest of us staff or family members, spouses or a daughter. Mary's daughter went with her. And then 7 from Sunset Hills. 3 residents and 4 staff and folks from over there. So wonderful journey. So our day of departure was July the 16th, that morning. And I was about an hour from leaving my house to go to the airport when I got a phone call from Lufthansa. Our first flight was scheduled from St. Louis to Frankfurt. And Lufthansa called me. They canceled the flight that day. They had mechanical difficulties, and I suppose I would rather be on the ground than in the air on a plane with mechanical difficulties. And I thought, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And they came to me with a solution. They said, we've got some options for you. We can get 19 people on a flight from St. Louis to Chicago on United, and then transferred to American from Chicago to London. So that was going to be a different route. And how many of us from here at Chesterfield? 19. That seemed like that's a good number. So we worked that out. They said we have another group of folks on a flight from St. Louis to Pittsburgh on United, transferring there. And so what we did, our Sunset Hills travelers, we put on that plane. They got off and sent off. They had a small weather delay in Pittsburgh, but I'm sorry, I keep saying Pittsburgh, it was Philadelphia. And then from Philadelphia on then to London. And they made that journey after a slight delay and got there on time. The 19 of us from here at Friendship Village got on the plane bound for Chicago and then sat there for an hour. Well, they kept saying there were issues in the cargo hold and luggage that had to be repositioned. And we were all scattered through the plane because we were last-minute additions. Many of us could not sit together. My wife and I had separate seats. She was all the way in the back. And there were multiple announcements from the pilot. We still are working on the cargo. We'll try to get this going as soon as we can. And near the end of that, my wife overheard the flight attendants saying, "Oh my goodness, it's the rats." And we thought, what? And apparently the plane was hauling in the cargo hold boxes of live rats. And they had to get them positioned in a certain way before they could take off. I thought, this sounds like a bad movie somewhere. But finally we took off. And we landed in Chicago and got to our gate about 10 minutes before our other plane took off. So guess what we didn't make? That connection. So, first day of the journey, surprise, we're in Chicago. Now, our flight out of Chicago was supposed to be at 8:15 at night. And so we sat everybody down, and Carmen and I stood in line for 3.5 hours because Chicago had storms all during the first part of the day, and all kinds of planes had been canceled, trying to get rebooked. And they finally got us rebooked for 24 hours later on the next flight on American from Chicago to London, but it wasn't until 8:15 at night. But it took us 3.5 hours to get everybody processed for that. And then guess what we had to find? Somewhere to sleep. That's exactly right, Marty. And so we were checking the internet and on the phone, and guess what was all booked up in the area because of all the other cancellations? And so finally we found a place in the city. We got everybody to a place. I laid my head on the pillow at 2:30, and I think by 2:35 I was asleep. But that allowed people to sleep in. The hotel graciously gave us breakfast. It turns out we were within short walking distance of the Chicago Bean. So what did we do? We ate breakfast, marched everybody down, took our pictures. We could have gone on a tour of Chicago. Here's the problem. Everybody had their carry-on luggage, so I didn't want to walk everybody around with their luggage. By the way, guess where all the checked bags were? Still at the airport. So lots of people didn't have change of clothes or a toothbrush. Finally, we got on board that plane and we were off to London. So day 1 and 2 was all about getting there. Day 3, we made our arrival. That is our bus that eventually picked us up. Everybody arrived safe and sound, a little disheveled in London. Now, our bus tour started the day before. So there were our Sunset Hills folks and 20 others from the public started the day before we got there on their journey. Pilgrim Tours arranged for another bus and a different guide to pick us up, get us to the hotel, and reconnected to the main tour. So that took a little bit of time. We lost a little time at the airport because as we went to load the bus, one of our pieces of luggage seemed to be missing. And I ended up going back through the airport. They let me behind the scenes and we did a big search for that luggage. Could not find it. As I was returning to the bus, another one of our residents figured out their purse was missing with their money, their credit cards, and most importantly, guess what you need when you travel? Passport. Gone. They had made it through customs. They had it coming into the country. And so we got back to the hotel. Everybody got checked in. Those that were still up for it, which was most of our group, rejoined the rest of the tour as they went on to St. Paul's Cathedral, while my wife and I and our resident with the last passport learned how to use the London Underground train and went right back to the airport. And we filed a claim with lost property and did everything we knew to do. We first went through all the luggage, making sure that stuff was truly gone, and it was. So we filed a claim there with the airport. When you lose a passport overseas, where do you go to get a new one? You go to the embassy. In London, now this is Friday night by this time. Guess what's not open on Saturday and Sunday? The London embassy. So if we were going to the embassy, it was going to be Monday. Guess where we would no longer be with the bus tour on Monday? London. Because we're in London for a couple nights and then we're off. By the way, I prepared a journal for everybody on the tour. And there were scriptures for every day and facts about the sights that we see. Our very first day, and I wrote this back in March. Day one of the journey, which was all about travel, this was the verse for the day. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And I put lyrics from a hymn for each day of the journey. Guess what our hymn was that day? God will take care of you. Little did I know how prophetic that was going to be as we encountered these sudden difficulties in the beginning. So we arrived in London. Linda and I made it back. I hit too many buttons. Let me back up here. The rest of our group went on to St. Paul's Cathedral. That's a picture of St. Paul's Cathedral. I have not seen it in person. Those of you that were part of the tour and got to go there, raise your hand if you're in this room. Real quickly, what did you think of St. Paul's Cathedral? Majestic. Any other words? How many of you are too tired to remember what St. Paul's Cathedral was like? We were pretty tired. And so Linda and I learned how to use the underground, made it back to the airport with our resident, got that claimed. I slept good that night as well. The next morning then we got up and our whole group, now combined, went on to Westminster Cathedral. You might recognize that. You have probably seen that on the television. What's the main reason you have probably seen Westminster Cathedral? Royal weddings. Not only weddings, what else? Crownings, coronations. Most recently, King Charles, crowned there at Westminster Cathedral. And so one of the things that we saw not long after, that woman pointing there, that's Liz. She's our English tour guide. She was wonderful, incredibly knowledgeable. To me, she seemed like the quintessential English woman. Like anything you would picture, it was her. Her little mannerisms and quirks and expressions. And she was a wonderful guide. She's pointing out to us the coronation chair. That chair, since like the 12th century, is what a king or queen will sit on when they are crowned. They move it into position. Today, they keep it behind bars. It used to have what's called the Stone of Destiny. During the Scottish unification with England, the Stone of Destiny was moved to Westminster Chapel, and it was built into that chair. In the 1950s, some students from Scotland snuck into the cathedral and stole it and took it back to Scotland. If you want to see a wonderful movie about that, it's called The Stone of Destiny, and you can watch it on Amazon Prime. My wife and I just watched that again the other night after our journey as we thought through. Today, when a king is crowned, they move that chair into position. They get the stone back from being on loan to Scotland. They place it there underneath. Do you know why they do that? It's representative of the fact that when a king or queen is crowned, in order to be the ruler of Scotland, you must sit upon the Stone of Destiny. So you are the King of England and you are the King of Scotland, of course of Wales as well, the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland as well. But that's why that stone, it represents Scottish rule. And so she's pointing that out too. There is no stone in that today. It's in Scotland. In fact, later after the tour, my wife and I stayed. We went to the museum where that is kept. And a week before, some kids broke in and caused some kind of damage. The exhibit was shut down. So I have a picture of a sign that says the Stone of Destiny. I didn't get to see the stone either. So we spent that time at Westminster Cathedral. You can see there are many people there. It is a large place. It's really massive. There are all kinds of folks there. There is a tomb, kind of like our tomb to the unknown soldier. There's a tomb for that in the floor for British folks there, and it's marked. And you see people standing off like in the center there in the back in red. They're making sure nobody interferes with that. And there are all kinds of tombs and memorials built into the floor in various aspects of that at that cathedral. There's some other shots, some of the side wings, incredibly ornate, beautiful glass, really an amazing place to be. We left Westminster Cathedral in the rain, and we went to a riverboat ride on the Thames River. And so you see many of us standing there in line for that ride. We were on that boat for about an hour as it took us up the river and back, pointing out many of the sights. There were several hundred people. It was a large boat, all kinds of tourists on that. That picture is through the glass looking at the Elizabeth Tower. You and I better know it as Big Ben. The Big Ben is actually the bell at the top. But that's how we commonly refer it. And of course, the Parliament building. And there were many sights along that we got to see. The local guide was excellent, told all kinds of stories as we traveled there. From there, then we had some time, we got off that boat after about an hour, and we went to the London Eye. Do you know what the London Eye is? You see that now in all the skyline of London, that big round Ferris wheel seems like an inadequate term for what the London Eye is. It is massive. And we all got to ride that. It takes about a half hour to do a revolution around. We got everybody there, and that's inside one of those little capsules as we go around, and you get to see the wonderful features of London. It was a rainy day, and yet it was wonderful to see that. You can see I'm looking out of my capsule at some of our other group members in another capsule there, taking their picture as we go around. And then it's kind of a rainy picture of the rain on the glass, but then again, there is Big Ben and the river and the Parliament building as we're looking at it from the London Eye. As we moved into the afternoon, the day did begin to clear, and we went to the Bridge of London and the Tower of London. And we caught a rare sight, as it's maybe hard to see, but there's kind of a clipper ship. The sails aren't out, but the mast is there that needed to get through, so they raised the drawbridge. That didn't happen very often, but sure enough, as we were standing there, up went the drawbridge at the Bridge of London as they went through. And just the other side of the Bridge of London is what is called the Tower of London. And the Tower of London is a whole compound. That's the main building. There were beheadings there. There's a prison and dungeon inside that. You didn't want to be sent to the Tower of London. Notice the guard. That's not a costume. That is his uniform. And the guards that serve the Tower of London and offer protection there, these are people that have served at least 22 years. They have to be distinguished with certain levels of service. They apply, and if they're selected, they live inside that compound with their families. And their job is to keep the ground safe. Anybody else know what is housed to this day in the Tower of London? Not in that building, but in the compound? What's that? How about the Crown Jewels? And so that's a separate building. We all got to walk in there and see the Crown Jewels. They are amazing. Guess what they don't let you do? No pictures in there. So my picture is the sign and the crown, or the crowns of our head, as we walk into to that. But no photographs are allowed for security purposes on the inside. That's how we ended. That's day 4 of our journey. Day 5, which was a Sunday morning, they got the whole group up, down into, and took them down to, that's Buckingham Palace. Those are near the front gates on the front side of that. That's our whole group. You'll notice that my wife and I are not in that picture. And that's because while we were at the Tower of London, we kept checking a website at the airport for lost property. And we discovered there was an item that sounded a lot like the purse that we needed to find. And so we called, they went and got it. They asked us to describe the contents of that purse. We did. And it turns out a lost purse and all the money and all the cash and the passport were turned in. It was an answer to prayer. So that Sunday morning, while everybody got their picture taken at Buckingham Palace, My wife and I and our resident who was missing those items, we took the train again. Back to the airport, made our way there. We had a photocopy of the passport, turned all that in. All of that was given back to us intact. And then we took an Uber, which is cheaper than the local taxis. And we rejoined our group at the lunch at midday at a travel stop and caught back up with them. So we're not in that picture, but we're so grateful that I wasn't going to have to spend the rest of the time at the embassy trying to figure that out. We're grateful to the Lord. By the way, my wife and I, as we stayed later at the end of our trip, we did make it back to Buckingham Palace. She and I do have a picture of us with the palace in the background. We also bought special tickets last November. We got to tour inside of Buckingham Palace. I was inside that space that you see directly, that's called the East Wing. For the first time ever, the king has allowed tourists this season into that part. It was built for Queen Victoria, who was crowned very early, and there was no place really in the palace to raise a family. So that's why that wing is constructed. When the royal family comes out on the balcony and speaks to the crowd, they do it from there. Now, I will tell you just real quickly, this is days later at the end of my time, just Linda and I. While we're in that room, it was the day that England was celebrating the Women's National Rugby Championship. They won the international title, and 65,000 people gathered outside Buckingham Palace. I'm on the inside listening to the guide, the balcony, which you can't even open the curtain. The secret police will come and find you. But I'm just the other side of the wall, the balcony, and 65,000 people. And the guide's trying to talk to us, and guess what's coming through the wall? 65,000 people singing, Sweet Caroline, bum, 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 good times never felt so good. 65,000 people. So good, so good, so good. It is one of the most surreal moments of my life. That day, after we rejoined the group, we began our journey north. And leaving London, we stopped in Salisbury. Salisbury Cathedral has this church that has been there since, I had to write it down and make sure I remembered, is a church that's been there, I want to say, since 1200 something. It was built, they started in 1220, built that church in 38 years, and then added the big tall spire that you see there. That spire is the tallest spire in all of England for a structure built before the year 1400. Nothing else survives that's taller than that. It is 404 feet tall. So a football field and another third, that is the height of that. Now, the water table is very high there in Salisbury. And so over the years, the weight of that tower has caused parts of the cathedral to sink. And so they had to reinforce that through the years. And so we're there on a lovely day that afternoon. We got to tour all through that cathedral. One of the other claims to fame of the Salisbury Cathedral is that it holds one of only 4 surviving copies of the Magna Carta. And they have that. You can't take pictures of that. That's a picture of the sign, and then I walk behind the wall, and you could lay eyes on the Magna Carta that's housed there. That middle picture, they have a place in the middle of the cathedral where they're constantly checking the water table and making sure how deep the water is, because a certain amount of water has to be maintained to help support the structure. And so they talk about that. And then there's a side picture. You get a sense of the grandeur of that day. After our time in Salisbury, we then drove on to a very famous location that has been in existence since at least the year 2800 BC. Anybody guess where I'm going? That's Stonehenge. And we got to walk all around Stonehenge. Linda Matashu, I think you're in this room. There you are, dear. But all of our group there were many people there. And we probably spent an hour just walking around and looking at Stonehenge, all the different angles, and hearing some of the accounts and stories of that. We had free time. Yes?
Could I add that it was very very windy.
Yes, the wind is blowing like crazy there in that big open field. That's right. And our hair was everywhere, all of us there. And so you saying your hair doesn't look like that every day? Is that what you're trying to tell? No, Linda and I too. Linda's hair is just, as we got our picture taken as well. We ended up that night in Oxford. You might know Oxford for its great university. We got to tour parts of that the next day, some of the various sites of Oxford. There's a big monument there dedicated to various martyrs in the center of town. And the buildings of Oxford are spread through all the town. There are multiple, I forget how many colleges. And the way it is, different buildings are the colleges. The students there live in those buildings. They interact with the professors and things there. Do you know some of the famous graduates of Oxford? Yeah. That would include who? C.S. Lewis is part of that. J.R. Tolkien also taught at Oxford. Lewis taught at Oxford and Cambridge. Albert Einstein is a graduate of Oxford. People like John Locke graduated from Oxford as well. There are numerous people. John and Charles Wesley came up through Oxford University as well. So great importance to the church. And so we had a separate guide. We divided into two groups, and those guides took us through and gave us long history. We spent about 3 hours going through various portions of Oxford. If you ask my wife what was the best part of the trip, it was her time in Oxford. My wife is an educator, and so she loves the stories. The great library there is world famous, and she'll tell you she got 4 minutes in their gift shop. Enough time to use the restroom, grab a few things, and get back on the bus. And so if we go back, guess where I have to go and spend more time? It's there in Oxford. And of course, I'm just giving you a few pictures. There are all kinds of places that we stop. And of course, there's a group photo that Zach Zook took in front of one of the main buildings. When students graduate, the other side of that is a meeting room where they get all the graduates ready, and then they cross over to an auditorium that holds 1,200 people that on the other side. And these are old, ancient buildings. We then left Oxford and traveled to Stratford-upon-Avon. Avon is an English word that means, anybody know? Well, it's where Shakespeare's from, but Avon is their word for river. Stratford-upon-the-river, Stratford-upon-Avon. And, of course, their big claim to fame is the home of Shakespeare. Now, that first shot there on the left side is just kind of a big, long pedestrian area, lots of shops, lots of restaurants. We had free time to visit those shops and catch some lunch. But then we did do a tour of Shakespeare's home. That is his home. Now, he had another much larger house that he lived in. But I think it was his mother-in-law lived in this other house. He owned it. And then after she passed, he kept it. But it became a tavern. And for the next 250 years, that was an active tavern in Stratford-upon-Avon. Its claim to fame, owned by Shakespeare. Nobody else lived there after Shakespeare's time. It was a tavern all of that time for 250 years. The last owner of the tavern passed away, and the house went up for auction. And a man whose name you will well know decided he was going to buy it at the auction. His name was P.T. Barnum. And his desire was to buy it at auction, tear it down piece by piece, bring it over to the United States, and take it on parade. City after city, everybody could come and see the house of Shakespeare. And as we heard the person in the room tell us about that, my wife went, "Oh no," in her American accent. And the guy looked up and said, "Thank you very much for saying that." And just like that seems like an outcry to us, that was an outcry then. And so there was a local man who decided there was no way in HE double hockey sticks that they were going to allow P.T. Barnum to buy this house. And he pledged to buy it. You will also know his name. His name was Charles Dickens. And he agreed that he would buy the home of Shakespeare. They expected it to go off at auction for about £1,000. But the bidding kept going up and up. And finally, Charles Dickens won the bid at the cost of £3,000, triple what he expected to pay. He won the bid. Guess what he did not have? £3,000. So he, in a very short time, had to figure out how to raise the rest, and locals came along to help support, and there was a main benefactor that gave him the final check, and they turned it over, and Charles Dickens owned the former house of Shakespeare. And their dream was to turn it into a place for all people to visit. It took them another 10 years to renovate it because they spent all the money on just buying the place. But by the 1850s, it was opened as a tourist attraction, and it has remained such to this day. How about that? Yeah, it makes me want to clap too, James. That's great. So then that evening, we arrived in York. We got up the next morning in York, and I think it was the next morning. I got to look at it. Yep, day 6 to day 7. And we went to York Minster, or York Cathedral. Now, York is a very famous town in the middle of England as you're headed north. It was started as a Roman settlement in the year 71. That was a long time ago, right? And so, and that area was originally known as, you might know this ancient name, Northumbria. But the heart of Northumbria eventually became York. And then this is the largest Gothic cathedral in all of England. Not just tall. I don't have good pictures of this, because this goes on for like a city block. It is long and it is wide. And we didn't go inside. You could have. They gave us free time to explore York. And so our group was there around lunch, and so we went through there. And so that's a picture of the York Minster and some of the areas around it. They did walk us down to a place called the Shambles. If something is the Shambles, what do we mean by that? It's all chaos and disorder. But that term has come to us because of this location in York. This area was called the Shambles, and this particular region was full of butcher shops. And they would butcher animals, and the meat would hang, and the blood would run down the streets. And it was a chaotic mess. But the Shambles was the name of this area of shops. But because of the chaos ensued, it impacted English language to this day. That has become a term that we use, but this is where it is sourced. It is a very crowded area. I'll give you an example of that crowd. And you can see we are wall-to-wall people trying to make our way through the Shambles. And there are all kinds of shops. There was various lunch places. And my wife and I stopped at a little place along there. And this was our appetizer for lunch. Anybody know what that is? That's a Yorkshire pudding. You and I think of pudding, and we think it's made by Jell-O. But pudding, it means a lot of different things. You can have pudding that's a meat. By the way, many of our breakfasts at the hotels were standard full-fare English breakfasts that consisted of scrambled eggs or fried eggs, stewed tomatoes, mushrooms, help me, residents, other things that were on that buffet, sausages, English bacon, which is more like ham. It's not like what you and I think of as bacon. They will call it bacon. And often a blood pudding, which was a round piece of fried meat, very dark in color. It doesn't taste half bad. You just got to get it out of your head what it's full of. And so that was just about every day. If you wanted that for breakfast, you could have that, along with croissants and pastries and toast and other things. So a Yorkshire pudding is a bread dough that's baked in the oven. It is usually baked underneath a dripping pan at the same time as the meat.
Bert, don't forget the baked beans.
Oh, that's what I forgot, Gene. That's exactly right. Gene, you're from, is it Bristol area? Did I have that right? Where are you from in England?
Yorkshire.
Oh, you're from that Yorkshire area. And so, yeah, every breakfast, there's baked beans that you can have be a part of. And by the way, if you are really into it, there's what they call brown sauce that you can open up and put over everything as you eat it. It's actually pretty good. I was surprised. Jim?
York is a walled city too.
Yes, it is. It is a walled city, and the parts of that ancient wall are still there, surrounding that city. So a Yorkshire pudding, and this particular one, I had Yorkshire pudding a couple different places, but there in York they put onion in the bottom, and then you pour a gravy. It is surprisingly quite delicious. And so if I was going to have a Yorkshire pudding, I was going to do so in York, right? And so that was part of lunch. We then drove the rest of the day, quite a long drive then, on into Scotland. Those are pictures I took from the bus window, and there you can see our Welcome to Scotland sign as we crossed the border on into Scotland, and we got into Edinburgh that evening. And then the next morning, my wife and I got up and did a very early walk, about 6 o'clock in the morning. Just around the corner of our hotel was a little hill. Now this is city, but suddenly there's this hill and trees and very steep kind of climb, lots of steps and quite a slope. This angle doesn't really show you how steep that was. There's a place called the Dugald Monument, and as you get up there, you get this wonderful panoramic view of all in Edinburgh. So as I took out, I zeroed in on a clock tower, and you can see Edinburgh Castle. They're kind of in the middle at the top. It's very high on a hill there in the midst of Edinburgh. That's as I look out, and I look down at my feet, and there's a whole patch of thistle. So I took those two shots within seconds of each other, one looking out and one looking down at my feet. The Scottish thistle, of course, is a great symbol for them. They will tell you a story about a time of battle when the English were approaching the Scots and trying to sneak up on them at night, only to step through a thistle patch and cry out, and the cries alerted the Scots, who rose and fought off the English and sent them running. And so they will credit the thistle as the salvation of Scotland. And so that's why it's a great symbol. Oh, I'm looking at it. You can't see it. Excuse me. There it is. So the picture that I'm looking out, and then down at my feet, those same shot taken within seconds of each other. That day in Edinburgh, then, we went on into the old part of the city, which is, if you have read the Harry Potter books, J.K. Rowling wrote the beginning and most of those books while she was in Edinburgh. And when you look around that, it looks like you're on Harry Potter set the whole time. The Gothic nature of those buildings, it's very unlike other places that you see in England or Scotland, at least that I saw. A very magical, majestic city. So there we are down in the heart of the city, and we are headed toward the house of John Knox. John Knox is the great Scottish reformer, led the Reformation movement in Scotland. He started off as a Catholic priest, but he became good friends with some leaders in the Protestant movement, one of them who was beheaded and burned at the stake for heresy. And John, that didn't sit too well with him. And so he rejected his Catholicism. And they didn't think of it. It wasn't like you reject Catholicism because of Protestant. The whole movement was new, right? And he thought there's just got to be another way to do this. He ended up banished for a while. He ended up in Geneva, met with John Calvin and some others, learned a different way of doing church, eventually would bring that back to Scotland. This is, we're headed, that building with all the scaffolding, this is the house of John Knox. As you walk in, there is a plaque to him. You'll see, if you can't read it here, this plaque on the side says, John Knox, and this is the famous quote about him that was said from the time, John Knox is able, in 1 hour, to put more life in us than 500 trumpets continually blasting in our ear. He was a powerful, powerful preacher, but he was also the reluctant preacher. He came to preaching later, reluctantly. He was actually in St. Andrews, where we will see later that he preached his first sermon to great impact. Outside of his house, you can see there inscribed in Old English, can you see what that says? Love God above all and love your neighbor. The phrase will continue around the corner on the other side of the building. Here's a famous portrait of John Knox. As you go through his house and go through the different levels, you see the different things. You get to the end of that. They have a little outfit you can put on and get your picture taken. So, Janet, you're here somewhere, aren't you? Yeah, there you are. So I think Zach took that picture. So there's Janet dressed up like John Knox. And not to be left out, here's another guy. From there, then, we went to St. Giles Cathedral, which is in walking distance. John Knox ministered for a time in that church. It's one of the great Gothic churches of Edinburgh. Very, very crowded, very ornate. And we got to walk through parts of that. Incredible ceilings. The stained glass is amazing. And so I just have a few shots for you there as you kind of see some of the side wings and the great Gothic nature of that. I took the picture of that piece of stained glass. Zach Zook looked up at the ceiling and took the other shot that you see there. That's the ceiling and the main part of that cathedral. After our time at St. Giles Cathedral, we got some free time to walk around, and people split up to do lunch and different things. They were closed. We didn't get to eat there, but we found this place. Birdie's Proper Fish and Chips. Almost my namesake there. And then some of the other shots there that's just across the street from our hotel. That's actually another hotel with the flags outside. There is a statue of Wellington there. Wellington is the one who led the forces, English and Scottish forces against Napoleon. There were great Scottish men that formed battalions and fought at Waterloo, Quatre Bras. That's part of my family story. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, John Campbell, was part of the 42nd Regiment. They are known today, you would know them maybe by this name, the Black Watch, and men of Scotland that banded together and helped to defeat Napoleon at Waterloo. And so they have great reverence for Wellington, and that just a block down from our hotel is a great statue of him there as well. The next day, we went on to Stirling Castle. And a great castle, not a functioning castle, but one that you can tour, very much intact. It's high on a hill. There are cliffs on three sides of this castle, only one way to approach it. Stirling Castle is famous for multiple reasons. Many Scottish kings and queens were crowned there, including Mary, Queen of Scots, crowned there at Stirling Castle. In later years, governed by one of my namesake in my family clan, and Archibald Campbell was the governor at Stirling as well. So many Scots were crowned there. It's a large compound inside, and we got to tour various aspects of that compound. There we are listening to our tour guide. There are lots of other people around as we went through various aspects of that castle. Parts of it have been redone with tapestries from the time, some of that recreations. We got to see where the open chambers were like, what the bedrooms were like, different places where they lived and conducted castle business there in Stirling. You go outside, you can see kind of the sense of the view from there. You're way up high. There are ramparts with cannons that are all around this castle, and really quite stunning. As we finished our time at Stirling Castle, we went on to the bus to the seaside to St. Andrews. What is St. Andrews famous for? Golf, that's right. The Royal Golf Academy there in St. Andrews, famous to this day. What you're looking there is the golf course. Does that look like a golf course to you? No. It's just one great big green patch. There are no sand traps, there are no hills. It's flat, but that is the course at St. Andrews. And we stopped there with the bus. I took that shot as we were standing there at the bus. I went down by the seaside. You'll see some of the water there as well. There's another section with a beach and sand. That sand and beach is where they filmed segments of the movie. Some of you will remember this movie, Chariots of Fire. The scene where Eric Liddell is running along the beach. That's right there at St. Andrews where that took place. And right next to that big open green, these are the golf shops that are there as well. And then looking back from the seaside towards the city, you can see that up on the hillside there as well. St. Andrews is also the home of St. Andrews University, college, I forget. Pat went to school there, so we're back in the town where you went to school. How long were you there at St. Andrews, Pat?
A year.
A year.
In 1962.
In 1962, so got to go back after all that time and revisit. And St. Andrews is also the home of Trinity Church, where John Knox preached his first sermon. And some of our folks, I think, got to go inside. Paul, Judy, did you guys get to go inside that, I think? I knew you were headed that way. By the time I got back there, they had closed for the day. And so I didn't get inside. But notice all the beautiful flower arrangements along the fence goes all the way around. Absolutely stunning. That was our last day of tour. We went back to the hotel at Edinburgh. We were up at 2 in the morning, putting our luggage outside of the door for the porters to take down to the bus. We were at the bus at 3 in the morning, made our journey to the airport, got everybody checked in by about 4. Linda and I said our goodbyes to everybody. They went off to their gate, and she and I sat for a couple hours in the airport and waited for the rental car place to open for she and I to continue our journey for another 5 days. Yes, I did drive a stick shift through narrow roads in Scotland. And I will tell you, with the stick shift on the wrong side and the steering wheel on the wrong side and the lane on the wrong side. Isn't that arrogant of me to call it the wrong side? And I'll have to tell you that adventure. But overall, day 10 then was all about the return back to Friendship Village. And of course, so many absolutely wonderful memories and stories, and just so many things that we got to be a part of all through that time. Questions or comments? And by the way, Mary's got a microphone because this is going out on 2493. We are recording. I'll do a little bit of editing, and then we'll show this on channel 2493 multiple times for people to watch it. But if you have a question or a comment, we want to make sure that whoever watches the recording later can hear you. So let us bring you a microphone. Comments, questions? Right here. Pat, they're bringing you a mic.
I just want to share with everybody, I put on a Fitbit or a pedometer when I left Friendship Village. I didn't turn it off except for the night until the time we came home. That was 57,000. Okay, the steps we took on that trip, or I did anyway, 57,967 steps.
That's a lot of steps. When I calculated mine from my Fitbit watch, we walked somewhere most days between 5 and 6 miles every day throughout that journey. And I ate well, and I didn't put on a single pound. Can you imagine? I'm not even sure how that happened. Yes, right here, Jean.
But you talked about Westminster Cathedral.
Yes.
It's Westminster Abbey.
Yeah, actually, you're right. Thank you for correcting. They do call it Westminster Abbey. That's right. I think of them generally as cathedrals, but you're absolutely right with that.
Westminster Cathedral is a Catholic RC.
Yes. Westminster Abbey is the place of coronation. Sure. Thank you for that correction. Judith.
Did you eat the haggis?
Did I eat haggis? So here's the answer to that. During our time with the Friendship Village portion of that tour, I did not eat haggis. However, during the days that followed, 2 nights, my wife and I stayed at a bed and breakfast, and I got to pick the items that were fixed for me. So I included in my breakfast that day haggis. And what they brought to me was, it looked a lot like the blood pudding. It was a round slab that had been fried in a pan. And I ate it, and it was better than I expected. That is not the same as saying that I would order it again, but it was better than I expected, and I probably ate 2/3 of it. So go Bert, right? And got down.
What is it?
So a haggis is a combination of liver and other entrails put together, traditionally served in a sheep's bladder. And I don't know that this had the sheep's bladder, but it was. And years ago, they would fix that, and the ladies would take that and fling it out to their men in the fields, and that was their lunch. But I ate it as a breakfast. I also went to a pub, Judith, the night before, and they had fried haggis balls on the menu. So I thought, where else am I going to go and get that? I also got that. and all that fried dough helped that haggis go down. So, yes.
Hey Bert, don't forget about Benson's Restaurant.
Yeah, that's right. At one of the restaurants, when we were in Stratford upon Avon, Susie and others stopped at a place called Benson's. Of course, Susie's last name is Benson, and when they found out, they let her keep one of the menus. And so Susie's going around telling everybody she owns a restaurant in Stratford upon Avon now. It was
I told him I bought a restaurant, so I'm not coming back to work anymore.
That's right. By the way, your retirement final?
The end of the month.
End of the month. And so she's about to, congratulations to you, Susie. Anyone else here? Question, comment, thought? Jerry, let him bring you the microphone here, sir. Right here.
President Trump has a golf course over there.
Yeah, it's in Aberdeen, which is not far from St. Andrews, actually. And he was there while I was in Scotland. I will tell you the Scottish generally not real excited about that. However, the golfers will tell you that his course is amazing. And so we heard both things. That there's kind of anti-Trump sentiment like you might find in this country. In fact, I didn't put this picture, but while we were walking through St. Andrews, there was a community news thing with glass. People can put up notices all about local happenings, and somebody had a hand-scrawled note in the middle of that just said, "No Trump." I thought, really? Here we are. I'm in Scotland, and I'm finding that. And a lot of the local papers, just like papers here, want to take him for task. And so there's a lot of that sentiment. But I did talk to some golfers that say they are thankful. His course employs about 80 local people, and his course is absolutely amazing. If you're a golfer, they say it is the place to go. So very, very interesting. Yes, Rosella. Thank you, Judy.
Well, I just wanted to tell you all that on my...
Hold it real close. That's right. Like an ice cream cone.
Okay.
There we go.
On my father's side, we are related to William the Conqueror and John Locke.
Ah,
The Locke family that's my maiden name, and
that's a great English connection there. Absolutely. All right. If you have other questions or comments, myself, or if you were on the trip, just raise your hand. They would love to tell you their experiences and be glad to interact with you. When's our next trip? I don't know. We are taking people to Branson next month. That trip has been long full. And we will do another international trip, but we'll reevaluate. Will we go back here? There's a big part of us that would really like to get back to Israel. I need to know that that is stable and secure before we would ever do that. And so we'll see what the future has yet to bring. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your dinner. Any of us would be glad to stay and share. We had an amazing time. Lots of special moments along the way. Very thankful to the Lord. And the devotional guide that really gave us some areas to reflect as we journeyed through. Thanks for coming today. God bless you all. Have a great afternoon and evening.